So this year has been about learning fly fishing again. So I had been a fly fisherman previously. I've fly fished a lot in creeks in Arkansas growing up, um, and after I first got married, um, both trout and smallmouth. And so I've been out of it, conventional fishing, working in the fishing industry for 20 years. I haven't spent a lot of time fly fishing in the last 20 years, so I picked up a fly rod again last year, and then I'm learning the techniques again and practicing and getting good with them again. So I've spent a little time this year trying to get better with EuroNymphing, a very effective way to catch trout. Um, I have some small streams in Kentucky where it's mostly, it's all stocked fish, but it's good little streams you can go practice techniques and stuff on. So, this creek has been low this year. We've not had much rain over the summer. The last 2 months, we've only had a couple days of rain. It came up a little bit on the recent rain, so I snuck out and wanted to practice on kind of some slow flows, knowing that a bunch of rain was coming. So, um, again, just catching small little trout, more focused on my technique on a slow moving stream. Um, so the water is running against that far bank. There's a deep little trough there. It kind of flattens out on this side of the creek, but that side's got kind of deep water, and then it kind of turns along those laydowns. And so it's doing a little more than you can kind of see from this angle, but it's not moving very fast. So I'm using a very light tungsten beaded nymph, some that I tie up myself that mimic what looks like caddis larvae, probably some hellgrammites. Those are the things I've seen late summer and fall on this creek when I've picked up rocks and turned them over. So I try to mimic those. You can use pheasant tails, hare's ears, Frenchies, all of those have caught fish for me while I've been practicing. But again, for me, it's more focusing on what my rod level needs to be, watching my cider, getting the weight right with my jig. Because again, I'm kind of teaching myself all this as I go. I went out to Yosemite earlier this year and fished with a trout guide out there, Greg, and he taught me a lot about EuroNymphing, and that was in pretty swift current, pretty deep water, wild trout streams. So it was a great lesson for me to kind of get back into it in a big way. What's interesting is now this creek that I'm fishing, of course, this was a few weeks ago, and it was kind of at its lowest level. Now it's roaring and raging. You can hardly even fish this spot because the water's running so hard through it right now. In a few days it'll go back. It's a spring fed creek, so it takes 3 or 4 days and the water stabilizes, so it'll have really good flow now in it. It's got great levels, so the trout are going to spread out a lot more. So again, I've been trying to go over there. It's a couple hours. Well, it's not a couple hours. It's a little over an hour away from me. We have a military base that has creeks in it, and you can get a permit to fish in there. So it was a little bit decent, a little bit nicer stock trout. But again, I'm more focused on my technique. Holding my rod high through the shallower sections, holding the rod a little lower, and kind of letting the jig bounce down into it. Again, it's like a size 12, size 14th nymph that I'm using. A very small bead on it just to give it a little bit of weight so I can kind of bump it along the bottom. And I'm just, I'm using got a long mono leader of about 20 or 30 feet. And so, you're more kind of tuck casting or lob casting. If you've got like 2 beaded nymphs on there, there's a lot of lobbing. But it's deceiving here. It looks like I'm really far away from that bank. I'm really not. I try to stay as far away as I can because the water's real clear, as you can see. But that's a little bit better vantage point of how far away I am. That's about the extent of how far I want to fish. and let those beads bounce down through that little deeper area. I have been going back now that the water's high, and like I went over there a few days ago, and it was high and muddy and running real hard, and I was fishing kind of the seams that were kind of on the edges, and turned out a mop fly was really deadly using the same technique, but EuroNymphing and a mop fly was very effective. Just because my mop flies have a little bit bigger beads on them. I think the fish could see them a little bit better, and that stirred up water. I rolled a few fish on streamers, but I didn't hook up and catch any of those, so I don't really have any good footage. I just, I basically hit them and they rolled over and got off. So I had 2 or 3 pretty nice trout hit a streamer, but I didn't catch any of them. So again, I'm sharing this with you because I am basically teaching myself to do this again. Of course, I watch YouTube videos like anyone else does, and learn from other people that are a lot better at it. So this is not a video as much to teach you. It's just I'm a proponent of spending time on the water. Get the general concepts of what you need to do, and then go on the water. Because you can sit and watch all the videos you want, but if you don't spend any time actually working on your mechanics, your motions, being in tune with your flies when they're in the water, then you're not going to be effective. So, not a knock on Kentucky, certainly not a knock on our game and fish, but Kentucky's not ever going to be a great place to go trout fishing. We don't have mountains, and so we don't have elevation. We have one fishery, the Lake Cumberland, that creates the Cumberland River, that creates a tailwater fishery. So, the Cumberland River is about the best place we can fish. We just don't have a lot of places we can go. I've got to travel 3 or 4 hours to get to good trout water. So I don't live in a good place to do this. So these little creeks, I'm actually a huge fan of, because I tell my wife, I was like, well, I'm going practicing trout fishing. Yes, I'm catching some fish. And, these creeks, there's a lot of people that fish them, and they're not very big. So